There you go.
All right, guys. So we are here. We're live in the Meaningful Ideas Trading Club, kicking things off here. Ben, I'm about to let people into the room. We should be live on Facebook as well. So we haven't had a chance to warm up, but that's great. I'm going to warm you up. I'm going to tell you how I started this and see if that interests you because I think it has a lot to do with what you would like to get into today. So the Meaningful Ideas Trading Club guys came out of basically an experience that I had myself where, welcome in everyone. I'm just telling this story to Ben here, how this got started. Um, I was involved in a group and I was scheduled to speak at this event that they had. And I was very excited about it, really super excited. And it was the one thing that I was going to do over this spring break holiday that I had with my family. And I said, don't worry, this is legit. This is a big deal. I want to do this. I want to speak in front of this group. It was going to be by Zoom. And my family was so cool about it. They're like, yeah, go for it, Dad. Like that sort of thing, right? I got all dressed up, pressed my shirt, set up my camera. We were in Florida and we had this nice deck and everything. So I'm sitting out there. I'm like, this is going to look so cool. It's the best background I ever had, and all that sort of stuff, right? And they're like, all right, we'll call you in. It's going to be like 11 a.m., whatever it was. I don't remember. And so I got in there a little bit early. I'm listening to the vibe. It's a good thing going, big networking thing. 11 o'clock comes. I'm waiting for the main guru, the host, to say, hey, I've got Kyle here. Kyle's going to deliver all this great news or, say some big things. Becomes 11:05. I'm like, all right, there's a little bit behind 11:10, 11:15, 11:30, and it's noon. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And I'm just like, they either forgot about me, all the things just start playing in your head. They forgot about me, or I'm not important, or did I have the wrong time? And I just shut it off. I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't have my family sitting there and waiting. They wanted to go to the beach or the pool, right? And so I got out of there, and the kid's like, "How'd it go, Dad?" And I'm just like, frankly, open and honest, holding back some tears. I'm like, I never got called in. And that just was a zinger to me. And what happened though was that I just felt like in the moment it made me question what I was doing and where I was spending my time and how I was valued and where this should all go, right? And I think my wife would say I somewhat ruined the rest of the vacation because I was doing that thing that a lot of us entrepreneurs do, or people that are have high expectations, want to be successful in life. I start walking up and down the beach and I'm not totally sad on myself, but I was like, what's going on here? And I just had this moment. And then I came back. I'm in Wisconsin, Ben. I think you are too, right? Came back to Wisconsin and I was like, number one, I'm done with that group. It's not on them. That's not their fault. It's more on me, right? And I just said, I just need to go a different path. I need to go a different way. But I wanted to keep conversations like this going. And I played around with a couple different ideas for a name and ultimately fell on the Meaningful Ideas Trading Club because I wanted it to be meaningful and I wanted to bring people together and I wanted to blow out the doors of traditional networking. I know those things exist and I know they can be effective, and that is important too. But I also wanted to create a space where people like you and Brendan and Angie could show up, no questions asked. You didn't need a membership card, and just join a great conversation and contribute. And so we've been doing this now since 2021. We're getting closer to that feeling, but we're creating something, and we're super excited to have you here. We appreciate you joining us. We might have been connected by Dan, I believe, right? And Dan told me about you, and he said you got to meet Ben. Ben's a great guy. He's got a lot to share, and so I wanted to tell you that so that could kind of kick off the meeting today, because I know that you like to talk about those things and working with other people and building a powerful network. Does that resonate with you?
Um, about that moment too, right? I mean, I think we've all been there where you're asked to speak and it's like one person, and then you're just having a conversation. And whether it's like one person you're talking to or 1,000 or nobody, moments in our lives have impact, whether we kind of recognize that or not. So I love this idea. I love the idea of getting together different disciplines and learning from one another. Because
Mm. Are you
like,
guys hearing Ben? Sorry, you cut out there, Ben, for a
oh,
minute.
sure. Can you hear me
Okay.
now? Okay.
Yeah. Did you guys lose him as well, or is that just on my end? Everyone lost him. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, he cut out a little bit.
Yeah, I think getting together and sharing different disciplines is amazing from a think tank perspective. I mean, the military's been doing it forever, so obviously it works to come up with
Yeah.
different like this. So I'm really excited to kind of dig in and learn from everybody here and kind of share kind of my story and where that all went. So yeah.
Great. Yeah. I'll get out of the way because I want to let you do as much sharing as possible on your story and how you can help us all. A couple shout outs. I just want to say thank you for everyone who's here live in the Zoom room. Feel free to jump into the conversation, put things into the chat, raise your hand, share ideas. That's what we're here for. Rob, special mention to you. I wanted to point out, networking wise. I can tell you that Pete, who you had referred me to a couple months ago, we are now utilizing in some of our searches. So I love building a bench. You never know when you're going to need a relationship, a connection. So thank you for that. All right,
Absolutely.
Ben. So tell us, yeah, how you doing? Are you good, Rob?
Everything's great. Yeah.
Good.
I love the guitar in the background. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's the first thing that always caught my mind. First time, Rob came on a Zoom screen, I think it's by design. It's got to be.
It harkens back to a prior life, right? Like, and it's also on the wall so that my thought is if it's right there where I work, I'm more likely to pick it up and play it. Unfortunately, it's got a little dust on it, so it's been a while.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you can break it out. All right, Ben, tell us a little bit who you are, where you're at and what you're doing. How are you helping the world?
Sure. So, my name is Ben Zang. I am a senior consultant with Transition Health Benefits. I design benefit plans, right? How do companies take care of their people? And so it's interesting when you have that kind of focus, what else gets revealed within a business as you're looking at that. So for me, I knew right away in doing this job that I wanted to build a big bench strength of different lawyers, CPAs, financial advisors, all
Nice.
the resources a small business person would need, right? And
Right.
so, um, and that was on by design because I was a small business owner for about 20 years, right? So I owned my own restaurant and hotel, and
Wow.
I remember the vendors that would come in and say, "Hey, I know you're doing it this way, but did you know other people do it this way?" And I was like, "Oh man, I've been beating my head up against that wall for,
Sure.
years doing it this way, thinking this was the only way." And
Right.
so to have somebody kind of look out for my business outside of me and the people in my business was a huge help. So when I flipped to this side of the desk, so to speak, from a consultant standpoint, I knew that's what I wanted to do, to be an advocate for the businesses I get to work for. So
Really? Was it one of the vendors that you met that kind of, had an impression on you that you felt like, hey, I like what you're doing. I've got some ideas. I want to help in that category.
it was like the Cisco food guy. He was
Yeah.
awesome. And then he had flipped over. And then there were kind of accountants and lawyers who said, "Hey, this is the way you do books," right? Like nobody gets
Mhm.
in to the business they're in to do all the other stuff that happens inside a
Yes.
business, right?
Yes. Right.
This
We
was
keep
not what you signed up for,
Ben,
right?
just
We,
we do lose you every once in a while. I'm not sure
yeah,
what's happening on the camera setting. And you have such important things to say. I want to hear it. So I'm not sure.
yep. Ben, do we want to try maybe going back to using your phone? I can
I
try
am
and get you
on
logged
my
on.
phone
Oh,
actually.
you are on your phone. It was your desktop. Okay.
Um,
Oh,
So, okay, we'll see as Ben is transitioning over, but I think everyone's having the same experience. I can
yeah.
just I'll share on what Ben said. I just had a conversation this morning where I got to a point where we've brought in who's now a finance director controller, you might want to call it that. And she's just really wonderful and knows way more than I do about numbers and organizing the numbers and what the numbers mean. And I have, I know that they mean something, but her ability to collect it and relate it to us is just huge. And so, here at our law firm, I've been trying to build out different compensation models and ways to structure things as you grow from a business where, maybe at first you're just kind of doing it on the fly and doing annual reviews and giving, wage increases and things of that nature. But I wanted something that was more of a philosophy that could be more rolled out, that it wasn't that we had to decide every time. Ben, I'm just kind of working off of what you said, where as a business owner, you kind of have some limitations. You have some ideas of like how it should look, but your skill set may not get you there. And I'm just so happy to report, first we brought in a fractional CFO, and then that person we wanted to tap into her knowledge base, kind of confirm our suspicions about what we needed, tap into her network, help her or help us find the right person. And and she did. So as we get Ben back into this, I want to hear more about his experience. But guys, do you have that? Where you reach that limit and you realize I need the resources of somebody else? And you bring that person in and the power of that? No takers. Nobody's no takers today. That's okay. So all
I
right.
think,
Well,
well, I was just gonna say, Kyle, I think like first admitting that need to bring someone in is maybe the first step, and that's always seems to be the hardest sometimes
mhm,
is admitting maybe you don't know everything, and so
mhm.
that can be the tricky part, and then actually bringing someone in is maybe the easier on the end of the whole thing.
Right. I agree. And
For
sometimes
me, it
it's
was more taxes. I needed help with that. I'm not a tax accountant by any means. Um, so that was helpful to
mhm.
have someone come in and help me with that.
Right. Great example, right? And take that off
Like,
of
what can I
your
write
load.
off? What can I write off? Where can I save money?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. All right, Ben, do we have you back?
Think so. We'll try this. Yeah.
Okay. It's a little bit
Um,
quiet, but I can hear you.
okay. Well, I will try and talk louder then.
All right. So pick up, sir, where you left off.
No, so I wanted to be an advocate really for businesses. And so for me, I thought the bigger the community I can build around myself to bring to a business, the better off I was going to be, which really led me to networking, right? Um, when I looked up, I was like 40, right? And had no prospects for a wife or kids. And I'm gonna make this segue as to how I got out of
Yeah.
the owning a business, right? And so met my wife. We were having a conversation one day, and I said, honey, I'm gonna be down to like 65 hours. We're gonna get to spend some time this summer. And my wife laughed at me. She's like, the normal work week's 40, right? And I literally laughed and said, I don't know what people do with the other 4 days, because that's just the first part of my week, right?
Right.
I knew where this was going to go if this was kind of the lifestyle I was going to choose, right? If I was meeting vendors over a hot plate, I was probably going to have a conversation with my kids over a hot plate, and it just wasn't the life I saw for myself as a dad and a husband, right? So
Right.
I slowly started to transition out into kind of the sales world because I thought, oh, salesmen don't work that much. It's complete and utter a lie, right? We just work different hours than most people do. And so I started to make that transition out, and then I got exposed to a lot of different industries and a lot of different business owners. And the cathartic thing for me was the same issues I had been running over and over again up against other business owners had the same issues, right?
Hmm.
Staffing. How do you handle people of different backgrounds? How do you build a cohesive team? How do you take care of them? What's really important in
Yes.
messaging, right? So all of that kind of came full circle, and I saw the problems And where I was successful, I got to see why I was successful because it was in contrast to somebody else's struggle, right? So I got to see all of that kind of stuff, and then my own struggles to see, oh, that's how you do that. That's what
Mm,
works with people, right? So it was a great learning experience as I got to help others, right? There's a great quote that says, "My needs are my gift to others," right? And so when you look at trying to help other
sure.
people's needs, they're really that gift that just keeps
Wow.
giving. So
I got to pause there. I never thought of it that way. Say it again, Patrice. Can you put that in the chat? What was it? My needs are somebody else's gift. Say it again.
our needs are our gifts to others.
Our needs are gifts to others. Rob, that just makes me so much think of all the strategic coach, Dan Sullivan, Who Not How. Dan Sullivan says if you're procrastinating, that's an okay tool actually because it tells you you're not the right person. And
Ah,
and then I guess frankly until now maybe thought of that then as like a I don't know, maybe not a burden to somebody else, but like guilty, almost like saying like, well, here and now it's yours or something like that. But you're right, somebody else is just loves to come and scoop that up, right? And be better at it and want to do it, have the know-how and the wantingness.
yeah, there's a great story about Benjamin Franklin. He was a diplomat at the time and he was having trouble moving this politician. And he couldn't get him to get on the same page. They just kept butting heads. And the guy was an avid rare book collector.
Okay.
And so Ben Franklin found out, I can't remember the book's name, but he found out basically his pride and joy of his collection. And he asked the guy if he could borrow it. Now, he said,
If you
I had
could
no
borrow the
interest
book
in it.
collection
He could borrow the one book,
of the
the
one book.
pride and joy of his collection, right?
Okay.
And so he kept it for 3 weeks, put it up on a shelf, and then returned it to him and said, "Oh, thank you so much for letting me borrow such an amazing gift." Well, that guy was his biggest advocate from that point on because they shared that bond over
Mm,
that book, right? And so I kind of look at it like if if you help me, that's the easiest way to build a connection is to either help someone else or have them help you because there's a level of trust and vulnerability that comes from that moment. So
absolutely. And you get things done. It's Stephen R. Covey wrote The Speed of Trust. And we get things done when we work with people that we trust, right? And speeds up your learning, your acceptance of it, your willingness to let go. How do you do that? How have you done that? How have you scaled that up yourself?
so I look at people like Dan Hansen's a great example, right? He's well networked within the community. He has that same kind of server mentality. I look for people like that because when you have that kind of mentality, opportunity just kind of falls in your lap. So I was with a large brokerage that went after large companies, over 100 employee companies.
Mm,
Well, I didn't have the network built for that. So for me, I had to grind on the phone. I had to learn how to make trust really quickly, right? And the thing that I noticed is as I was out there networking, trying to build my new community, because I didn't grow up in Milwaukee. So, and my restaurant was in northern Minnesota. So I had no network when I got here. It was just me and kind of my wife and then her friends since she was from here. So I had to build all that from scratch. And so when I started to build it, I would go to like Chamber of Commerce and you go to all the places where you think the networking happens, right? It's not
right.
that it doesn't happen in chambers, but you have that little scope of what's out there. And so you
Sure.
start there. And then rather than looking for people I could sell to, I looked for people that were looking for the people they could sell to. And then how could we together work together, right?
Right.
And then the idea and and when I came from the business side, I was really uneducated as far as sales goes and things like that. And I thought if you were a nice guy, sales just followed, right?
Sure.
And and yeah, you can build trust, but that's not what sales actually is. And so I had to get educated, and I read a ton of books and looked at people like Brian Tracy and
Yes.
all of the kind of greats that kind of teach you what that looks like. And then I came across Grant Cardone, who always to me kind of sounds like a car salesman at heart.
Right.
He's just super pitchy, right? Super
Right.
pitchy. But he said, the truth of it is everybody gives salespeople a bad rap, but really a good salesperson is just trying to help somebody.
Hmm.
Either they can help them with the product they have, or they can help them not waste any more time by moving them to someone who can actually help.
Right.
Right. And so for me, I took that to heart because I didn't want to push product. That was the last thing I wanted to do. But I do like helping people. It's what
Right.
gets me out of bed in the morning. Right. So
In sales, does it matter what you're selling? Did that make a difference for you?
it did for
Hmm.
sure. If I felt like I could help somebody with that product, I was far better at it. Like there
Right.
was this one of my first sales jobs coming out of owning my own business was the knockoff of the knockoff of the knockoff of the Yellow Pages.
Okay.
Now, I had not been in sales all that long to the fact where the internet existed at the time, right?
Sure.
So the Yellow Pages is not really a thing. So I was probably one of the worst salespeople they had because they'd
Okay.
be like, "You heard of the internet, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've heard of the internet." Right. So that kind of stuff was really hard. And then once I found like the benefit world is nice because you can actually help somebody, right? And there's so much to insurance that doesn't get educated. Like we don't have classes growing up as to this is what insurance is. This is how it works. This
Right.
is this is all of the hidden stuff behind there. And
Correct.
so for me, I was always the kid that didn't like the bullies, right? So I was always that kid, right? So, oh,
Reasonable.
you're
That's a
the bully?
reasonable.
Okay, let's see how what a bully you are, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I found that healthcare and health insurance and the lack of transparency is just another bully I get to punch in the nose every once in a while. Sometimes it works really well. Sometimes, we live to fight another day. But
Right.
I think that's you got to have something you believe in, right? And I think for me, I really believe in building communities. And so the product almost becomes secondary if I can come in and help. I have a saying, if I'm not the guy, I know a guy. And I always want to be the guy that knows a guy so
Sure.
that I'm in the conversation. For me, I just
Right.
want to be in the conversation. Right. So,
Right. Yeah. Being a connector is neat, right? Because even if your
mhm,
connection doesn't work out, that connection that you made might lead to another connection, right? That eventually gets them to what they're looking for.
yeah. Well, and I think there's a time, I think if you're short sighted in it, you're not looking at the time over time. Right. I can't tell you how
Sure.
many times I had a conversation 2 or 3 years ago that now becomes very relevant for somebody else or for my life in this moment.
Right.
Right. So,
You know what's funny about connections too? You have to be vulnerable in them. I found that just by asking and sometimes just telling people, hey, this is what I'm looking for. These are the problems that I'm having. So if you know anyone, please connect me. It has worked well for me. I've told this story here before when I had a time period in 2019 is when it started, and I wanted to make a certain amount of income in a 6 month time period, and I didn't know how I was going to do it. So at first I thought it, then I wrote it down, and then I started just writing down names, all the people that I could call that could help me brainstorm on potentially how to make that income in that period of time. And then I just started calling them, saying what I wanted, what I was looking for. Maybe some would ask why, others didn't care, you know.
yeah.
But and I just kept calling, and like then these connections started working, including one that turned into um, a much larger number than what I originally set out looking for because they had a bigger vision and a bigger idea. And
Yeah.
it wasn't just a one-time thing. It was going to be perpetual, right? And I was like, thank you. And um, but you have to be vulnerable in that.
You do. You do. I love that. And I mean, we need mentors in our lives, right? Mean, there's a lot more diagnosis now on the ADHD, autism, and all of the kind of neurodiversity spectrum that we didn't know growing up, right?
Absolutely.
We would just be weird or, oh, that's just his picadillas, right? That's really kind of how, but you need mentors. You need mentors on how to stay consistent, over a long period of time, how to expand your vision, how to run things that you don't know how to run, even like from a marketing standpoint. It's that sharing of ideas. That's why I love what you're doing here, because I think it's the different disciplines that kind of mentor you into where you want to go.
Right.
You know?
Rob's also an attorney, and attorneys are supposed to act a certain way and do certain things, right, Rob? And sometimes when we go outside of our box and then start asking questions like this, we're kind of told to go back into our box. So it takes that discipline, right, to be different and want to do things differently, which we do at our law firm. We want our, first off, we just want to be the best family law firm in Wisconsin. And we planted our flag on that. And I just don't know what else you can say. So we have to do everything to be the best, including having the best plan for our team members. So if people on this call have any specific questions for you, Ben, on what you do, can you tell us specifically? You can use me as an example. If I said, hey, I don't know, we're exploring our options here for our team members and what we need. How would that start? Just if I was a cold call, I either
Yeah,
called you up or you called me.
yeah.
Use me as an example. Run it through.
So the first thing I'd ask is, how many employees are we talking about? And
Mm-hmm.
how big is your firm? Right. So if your firm, and there's a gate, there's a natural gate in, if you're under 50 employees, full-time employees, or over 50 employees, right? If you're over 50 employees, the government kind of mandates certain things within your plan. But if you're under 50 employees, the first thing I start with is, you don't have to do anything.
Mm.
And then that always gets the kind of, wait, I thought you were the benefits guy, and now you're telling me I don't have to do anything,
Right.
right?
I thought you were selling me something, right?
Yeah. And I say,
Selling you
so the
knowledge is
truth
what
is,
you just sold them.
yeah. So I say, you don't have to do anything. And I said, and the reason I start there is because now we can be as creative as possible to get you to what the bottom line is, right? If you tell me I want to do something for my employees, that's very different than I have to do something for my employees,
Got it. Got it.
right? And then from you as an owner, we ask, are you a part of the benefit plan,
Sure.
right? Because and benefits are one of those really intimate things, right? I'm gonna get all up in your business. I have a line I use pretty much on every time I'm working with somebody is, I'm gonna have to ask third date questions on our first meeting. And I'm
Okay.
just gonna apologize up front, right?
Sure.
I'm not gonna ask you your weight, but pretty much everything else we're gonna get into,
Yeah.
right? So there's a couple of different things that I do a little differently than other brokers. Most people know about a fully insured plan, which is what's called like a guaranteed issue, meaning they just take your age and that's the number per plan, right? So you pick your deductible, you pick your max out of pocket, and if you're 50-year-old, it costs this much. If you're 30-year-olds, it costs less, right? Because you're younger and the
Sure.
tires have more tread on it, right?
Right.
So we kind of talk about that part. That's one box. And I actually make them draw the box. So if you guys are willing, if you have a piece of paper and a pen, grab it and draw 4 quadrants.
I do.
Somehow I don't have a pen this time. I don't know what I'm doing.
Really?
So I'm gonna have to do it in my head.
Yeah, so draw
Who
4 quadrants, and in the top left, put fully insured. Now I'm going to tell you a story about how this came to be.
I'm gonna assign somebody
In
here is going to be a great note taker.
the top right, we're going to call that level funded. And in the bottom left, we're going to write out ICRA, which is ICHRA.
Ikra?
ICRA.
Okay.
insurance guys give out acronyms like Oprah gives out cars. You get an acronym, you get an acronym, everybody gets an acronym, right? Oh, look, a pen. Perfect. Do you need it again, Kyle?
Top left, what was that again?
Level funded.
That's top left.
That's the top left.
Okay, level funded.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's the top right.
That's what I thought I heard. Okay.
Yeah, top
Level
left
funded.
is fully insured.
Fully insured, top right. All right.
Then the bottom right, we're going to call that BC, benefit concierge, or be creative.
Okay.
Okay. So level funded is different than fully insured or guaranteed issue. They're going to ask you questions. So I always give this example. If you run a landscaping business and I say, I'd like you to cut my lawn, you're probably going to have questions, right? How big's the lawn? When was the last time it's cut?
Sure.
If I say, I'm not telling you, Kyle, you just got to give me a price.
Yeah.
Well, in your head, you're thinking it's buckthorn. It's been that way for 10 years and it's the size of Lambeau Field. And that's the price you're getting, right?
Right.
Well, insurance companies kind of work that same way.
Really?
They're going to assume you're buckthorn and the size of, Lambeau Field. So
Okay.
they're going to price you more towards that side of the plan at 50 or at 30, right?
Sure.
They're going to take the worst side because they want to cover their expenses. And so that's what the price is kind of based off of.
Okay. Lack of detail, essentially.
Lack of detail, right? So they're just trying to cover their butts. So in a level funded, we're going to ask you some questions, right? When was the last time you mowed your lawn? Well, Tommy was a college kid. He mowed it a week ago. Okay. Well, how big is it? Well, it's a third of an acre. Okay. Now you'll get a more reasonable honed in price.
Mm-hmm.
So the insurance company's going to ask you, are you taking any medications? Do you have any cancer in your family? What's your weight? What's your height? What's your BMI? Do you take any? And really it's going to be on medications because that's the biggest cost driver in a health plan right now.
Sure.
Right. So if you answer those questions and you come back as a moderately healthy group, they'll give you a better price than what's guaranteed issue.
Mm.
If Angie's had like 9 heart attacks and 6 cancer diagnoses,
Yeah.
it will be less than the fully insured, right?
Hanging in there,
just white knuckling it to the end, right? So that's kind of where that part lives, and that's your one plan per company. Everybody gets their Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare plan, right? That's
Sure.
that half of the graph. If we want to drop below the meridian, the half point meridian, we're going to look at what's called an ICHRA, which is an individual choice health reimbursement arrangement. Meaning I love the balloons. Voice.
I don't even know how that happens.
That was awesome.
I missed it.
Like,
What
wow,
happened?
I've never gotten balloons in a
It
presentation.
was just like an automatic,
Oh.
like I must have done something with my hands and it recognized it, and there's just a bunch of balloons everywhere.
Yeah. But basically that's where we use the individual marketplace to build a group plan. And there are a lot of advantages to that, right? So if you look at just the myriad of people we have on the call, we're all in different stages of our lives, right? Maybe there's a 26-year-old who's indestructible. Well, he doesn't need to buy a lot of insurance. Maybe there's a 50-year-old guy who's got 3 kids and a wife and wants to make sure he's fully covered because now I have stuff, right?
Right.
And insurance is kind of protecting your stuff. So everybody has their own kind of needs. Some people have ailments that are on the behavioral health side. Some have it on the physical rehab side. Some don't have any, right? And our fingers crossed, keeping moving down the pathway. So everybody kind of gets to choose their own thing. And then from a business standpoint, that just becomes a budget number.
Sure.
Right.
Okay.
So what I do is I say, my job is to show you all the options. And your job is to say no to them as we move through this path. And then I say the be creative side, or the benefit concierge side, is maybe we look at other alternatives, right? Maybe we start with a dental and vision plan and we make me an advocate on the individual policy they already have, right? Maybe we don't have the budget number for this. And so usually what I do is I start with a level funded quote. And so it gives them at least an idea of the number that they're dealing with, right? And sometimes they choke on that number. They're like, oh my God, I didn't know it was that expensive, right? Other times it's, oh, okay, that's not as bad as I thought, or that's in the range of what I thought it would be. Right. And then we know which side we can play with. If you choke on that number, we're probably going to look at an ICRA or at a kind of creative scenario. Right. And there are things like health shares that people can do. If you're in the Milwaukee area, there's a great business called Solstice Health, which is a direct primary care clinic. Think of it like concierge medicine for like $60 a month.
Okay. Mhm.
There's a bunch of stuff going on in the healthcare where doctors are kind of saying, you know, we don't like this hamster wheel effect
Sure.
where the appointments are 10 minutes, right? We can't diagnose somebody in 10 minutes when we barely have their name and weight,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
So
I
there are a
have a
lot of
friend,
options.
he's a doctor and he just tells me, and he's at the tail end, right? Where he's just like, I'm so far into this, I can't undo it, right? But I'm just part of this process where it's just like, where are your numbers at? How many people did you see? Appointment, appointment, appointment. And that's how essentially I'm compensated. And, you can just see the look kind of in his face that it's maybe not how he envisioned this, right? When he started.
Right. I mean, there's a great book out there called American Sickness, I believe it's called.
Okay.
Nothing will get you more frustrated and angry than reading that book on
Ooh,
how our medical system is kind of turned out. And you can kind of see the too many hands in the pie syndrome of what that
sure.
is, and where kind of the art of medicine has been lost in some of the administrative stuff that
So
happens.
Ben, so Ben, if I'm interested in reading that book, and if that's the feeling I'm going to have, when would you suggest I read it?
Read So I suggest reading it late at night where you've already burned off a lot of energy because you
Okay.
don't want to be like first thing in the morning rage filled for your
Right.
day, I think. There were plenty of times I just put the book down and was like, I I honestly don't know if I can go on another minute thinking like this.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
There's an interesting thing of, so Medicare is kind of the interesting number in
Hmm.
healthcare, right? Because it's the starting point for how things are paid in multiples of the Medicare number, right? And so you think, so then they had to figure out, well, what does a knee surgery actually cost, right? So then there was an independent team that came up with a number for the Medicare number. Well, every year, of course, things get more expensive, and so there is like a college of senate of sorts that have different disciplines in there. And so if you think about, they say, okay, for the pool, for all of the things, we're going to give you 8% more money towards Medicare. You guys figure out where that's going to go. And the heart attack people are like, I'm a heart surgeon. I need all that money. And the
Sure.
podiatrist is like, yeah, well, people need feet to walk, right? And so there becomes this kind of general assembly of where all that money
Oh,
goes,
wow.
right? And so
Yeah, I'm just
you,
picturing all the disciplines in the room
right?
grabbing for that, right? And
Yeah.
wow.
And then you think about, that's just one side of it. Then you think about where pharmacy has gone. When I was with the larger agency, some of the numbers they pulled out, and back in like 2010, it was a $20 billion industry, pretty large number, right?
For
By
sure.
2030, it'll be a $400 billion industry.
Wow.
And so all of that, those costs hit the drivers of your health insurance plan, right? And when we talk about what we don't know, right? Are you the Lambeau Field and Buckthorn, or are
Hmm.
you Johnny just cut my grass?
Hmm. Yeah,
That's a lot of variance in between that. Right. And so
definitely.
now we look at like drugs like Ozempic, Trulicity, all of the weight loss drugs that are out there. I was
Sure.
just talking to a carrier. Um, they did a test pilot where they ran it for a year where they covered it, whether it was for weight loss or for diabetes. And the evidence was inconclusive that it helped them. Like there was no ROI in it for the, the insurance company. Meaning, even though you dropped weight, that doesn't tell, it doesn't basically suggest that now you're going to be healthier.
Okay.
Like your quality of
Whereas,
life isn't going to be better because you lost weight.
well, you could be 300 pounds, right? And
Mm-hmm.
not ever see a doctor. You could be 300 pounds and go on Trulicity and get down to 100 and, 180 pounds,
You'd probably need surgery after that.
but you still don't see the doctor. So they're not getting any savings from
Hmm.
the people that are using it because they theoretically they don't know from if you lost weight, if you're not going to a doctor, they're not losing anything on you. So you lose weight and you don't go to the doctor, they're not
Hmm.
losing anything on you. But that drug is $12,000 a year. That is an absolute bottom line cost. Right. So as much as we want insurance to pay for everything, they still have to make money to be able to pay for everything. Right. So it's
Sure.
kind of a hard thing. Not that I'm crying over United Healthcare or any of the other big bukas stock prices. Right. I mean, it is a problem in this country. And it leads back to what I said. Right. There are days I get to punch the bully in the nose, and there are days where, you know, I'm still bullied like
Sure.
everybody else. Right. But that's kind of the world we live in. So going back to the quad, the group, right? Right now on the marketplace, there are tax subsidies that are being given out for to make healthcare affordable, right? And so sometimes we leverage tools that are already out there for a company, and then I become instead of the broker on a plan, I become an advocate for individual employees. And so for me, what I built in my model is an ability to help on multiple levels.
Hmm.
So you don't have to say no to my help. You just get to say no to what kind of help I give you.
Got it.
And so from that standpoint, I should always win.
Because
Right?
you've got a lot of options there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I'm looking at it from their perspective, right? If you have PE private equity money and you're ready to, write some checks, well, let's write some checks, right? If you're bootstrapping this thing off the ground and you're trying to figure out how to get up the ramp, it's tough. So I'll work with you where you are, right? So I tell people a lot, look, business is always a ramp. And sometimes you're way up the ramp and it's awesome. Sometimes you're at the bottom and you're just trying to get that thing moving.
For sure.
So let's work with what you have. And I think once people understand that that's what I'm doing, then the pressure comes off, right? Then the vulnerable conversations happen, right? Then I can get an owner that'll say, yeah, I want to be on the insurance, but my wife isn't necessarily doing well. So what can we do? Right. So then you start to work with all of the pieces of the puzzle. Or um, I just need this one guy and he needs insurance. So how do I fix that? How do I do that? I don't really care. The rest of my people are covered on spouses plans and all this kind of thing, or they're 24 and they're on their parents' plan, right? But I need this operations manager to make my company move to the next level. I can't do it
Mm-hmm.
without them. Right. So that's a lot of what I do in a day is kind of consult as to, okay, if this is your movable piece, let's focus here.
And Ben, are you working? Are you working? How does your industry work? Are you able to help people? You're primarily in the state of Wisconsin. Are you
Mhm.
able to help people outside or throughout the entire United States?
I am. So I'm licensed in a couple different states, and a lot of times the licensing to get licensed in a state isn't that big of a deal, right?
Hmm.
And just like any other business, if like I'm working with a nonprofit in Missouri, I'm not really licensed in Missouri.
Right.
Now, I've already looked into licensure. It's really just me paying a fee and then I become.
Sure.
So I'm licensed in Florida, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and then probably soon Missouri, as it's
And is it small businesses primarily or mid-size or and what is small to you?
so small can be the single person entrepreneur to, that 50 to 100 market.
Hmm.
I have a couple of employers that are well over 100 employees. I
Mhm.
work really well with the volatile um, workforce, like some of your lower end janitorial, senior living, where the turnover is high.
Sure.
For a model works really well in that
Okay.
standpoint. Um, so yeah, that's
So do you
and
have
then
like a package that you kind of come in and offer as I'm trying to, kind of understand, because benefits mean many things, right? I think a lot of times people do think insurance, health insurance right away, right? Type of insurances take care of people. What else? What are the other benefits that are in your world?
well, there's dental, vision, short-term, long-term. There's like the deathbed type benefits that are
Hmm.
sometimes nice for an employee, but sometimes it's talking to people about something like Solstice Health, right?
Hmm.
Um, if you put your company on or buy a membership for each one of the employees at $60 a month, maybe then we don't buy as much health insurance, right? Because we've taken the lower end cost of the model off the table. And now it just becomes a catastrophic kind of HSA opportunity, as it were. So I work with a ton of financial advisors in a ton of different, and everybody has their own disciplines in that sense, right?
Right.
There's the guy that just wants to do investments. There's the guy that loves the 401k. There's the guy that just wants to do the education model. So based on that, that's a nice partner for me. There's pet insurance. There's a lot of fun kind of gym membership models and things like that that we can kind of talk about. And a lot of that is how do you fund that, right? How do you fund it either in a taxable way
Right.
or tax-free way? And so I work with a bunch of TPAs that will kind of help set up those lifestyle accounts. And then, when you run into the strange massage therapist at the networking event, right? Then they tell you, hey, I'm doing that model. And then you're like, great, I have a couple small businesses who wouldn't mind getting their people rubbed on once in a while,
Hmm.
right? So
Right.
it becomes an interesting connection. I saw the eyebrows, Angie. I saw them. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's those kinds of things that really kind of help design
Um,
stuff. Go ahead.
Within the network, some things that maybe I'd love to hear from you on. You talked about, helping people in their journeys, having an impact in your community, how to position yourself as an advocate in your network. What things can you tell us on some of those topics?
Yeah, I think you got to make yourself. Um, Everybody's been to the event where the guy just kind of throws up his whole playbook, right? You've just got. I love the term pitch slapped, right? Everybody
Okay.
has those
I haven't heard
guys.
that before. Pitch
Yeah, so
slapped.
pitch slapped, right?
Pitched.
Where they just give you their whole pitch. They're like, "Hi, my name's Ben Zang. You need to buy insurance because of this, right?"
Yeah.
And you're like, "Oh my God, please let it end." Right. And I think being an advocate or being somebody who's trusted is getting them to understand you're on their side as quick as possible.
Okay.
So, one of my favorite 30-second pitches is, okay, who in this room has a heartbeat? And so
Yeah.
everybody will raise their
Everyone
hand.
puts their hands up.
Or who in this room has people or has to take care of people that have a heartbeat, right? And then I say, well, that's what I do. And I figure out how to do that in the most creative way possible. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's enough. And I don't necessarily have to tell my work in health insurance at that point. Now they're like, oh, he takes care of people. Well, that's an interesting conversation starter right there, right? So, or I say you may have a broker, he probably has showed you this and this. Has he shown you something like this?
Mm-hmm.
It's the new idea for a business owner. And I think if you're always, because business owners struggle with, am I doing it right? I know when I had my own business, the things that would keep me up are How do I keep Jake fed? How do I keep his family? Like, I know his family. I know, like, how do I keep my doors open another day so that these guys stay with
Right.
us? Right. And, or how do I grow it to where I can pay these guys what they're worth? Or like, owners think about this kind of stuff. So if
Right.
you approach it from there, I think that helps. I think the other thing you do is you say, look, don't use me. If you have somebody you trust, don't use me.
Right.
If you need a second pair of eyes, I'm happy to be that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I think that's important. If people come to me for legal matters, family law stuff, I always tell them, talk to at least three lawyers. And I believe that, right? Because maybe, me or my law firm, we're not the right fit, but you need a fit. You need somebody to help you.
yeah,
Um, and, I'm not here to just gobble up everyone just to do it. And so I think that that's important. I know when my wife went through breast cancer treatment in 2021 and 2022, and um, we used different providers for different things, and we had that conversation at home, right? Like, well, if I want to go here for this, is this one going to be upset that I'm going over here?
right.
And we were really appreciative that everyone just cared about her and her care and figured out how to make it work rather than commenting, so to speak, on it or having judgment on that. And I can even remember, the first meeting there was a sign on the wall that says, "You want a second opinion? If you're in need of a second opinion, that's okay. We can help you or support that." And I appreciated that because right there, that told us you have permission. We're going to be okay if you want to have that conversation. And I just felt like that was important to have, especially with big things like that.
I completely agree. There are a lot of times where I'll say, look, I may not be the right broker for you.
Hmm.
We ended up buying a book of business, and there are some of those clients who want a different level of service model, right? Or find different important, like certain things are more important to them than other things. And I think you can't be afraid to fire a client, right? If they're not right. If your job is to help somebody and you're not the help they need, then
Hmm.
get them to the help they need,
Hmm.
right? I think that's the biggest thing. I love what you said about finding a second opinion, right? And having
Right.
that permission. I tell people you should shop, you should
Yeah.
ask other people. Like, and I have a client who basically brought me something in front of them, and they're like, what do you think of this? And I'm like, well, let me look into it. And it wasn't an idea I brought, it was something somebody else was trying to sell them. And I looked at it and I was like, I get it. It sounds good on paper, but I've never done this program before.
Sure.
And I said,
Yep.
so if you want to run it as an experiment, I'm happy to come along for the ride and give you my expertise or knowledge and things like that. But I won't necessarily guarantee stamp it that this is going to be a good idea. Right.
Right.
And I think you have to be open, and telling people what you don't know is is a big way to gain trust.
Right. Ben, when does a business know, like, you're never really set, although small business owners think they are set, right? Like, okay, now I have the person who's doing this for me on this end. I have that solved.
Yeah.
And that can become stale. Um, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me that I don't know, is it an annual thing? Is that too often? That's not enough of a measurement stick. When do businesses say, hey, let's take a look at this? Let's go shop it around. Let's get some second opinions
Yeah. I think you should shop it around at least once a year. Well, it
once a
depends
year?
really on what. Um, yeah, I'd love to say once a year, but year is kind of. I think if your broker's talking to you and you feel comfortable in
Hmm.
the conversations you're having, then stay with that guy, right?
Hmm.
I'm not a big proponent of just moving to move.
Right.
And I think people don't understand what we do. Like, there's not a lot of difference between me and the broker next door as far as the prices they get from United Healthcare. I don't have some secret sauce that says United Healthcare thinks I hung the moon and this guy smells funny. So the prices are going to reflect that, right?
Sure.
The prices are what they are on the guaranteed issue. They're
Okay.
designed
Right.
that way, right? So then it's really who's talking to you about what's best for your business. And I tell people, look, insurance is a year thing. It's a duration thing. If you come in now, like, oh, I'll have people that'll buy an individual policy now. I'm like, you're buying that policy for 8 months.
Right.
If you look at your time frame in 8 months, like if you're one of those people that's in and out of the thing, out of the hospital system, then fine. Then we'll plan on that for these 8 months. Let's look at what the costs are going to be over 8 months. If you're a business owner and you're trying to look at that stuff, that gets a little more difficult. But I always say, look, it's easier to add stuff than take away stuff from employees, because there's nothing that gets an employee more angry than feeling like they lost something, right?
Right.
So I
Right.
think they should look at it yearly as to what they're doing. And a lot of it has to do with knowing your people on the small business end, because many times small businesses are just like a family, right? We all know each other's business in here, right? So there is some strategic stuff you can talk about through that, but there's also, am I growing, and who's gonna be the next piece I need to bring into my business? That also shapes that conversation.
Without naming names of your customers, what are
Mhm.
the kind of the standouts if you said like, hey, this group is really getting it right? Like this employer, this owner, they do things differently. If I were to be able to work with this owner in every business, these are the things that are really cool. This is how they're taking care of their people.
There's a local bank that does 100% of their employee coverage. Now, I as a broker am not a fan of that. But if I as an employee would love that, right? I as a broker don't appreciate it because the employee doesn't appreciate it, because they never see the costs on
Mm-hmm.
the year and over year cost model. Um, there are a number of clients that use the ICRA not just to cut costs in benefits, which can be really critical if you're a slim line profit margin center, right, for your business. But there are also those that say, look, we're going to give you X amount of dollars, and we know that's more than your insurance is going to cost you. So we're going to let it roll over into an HRA for any of your medical
Mm-hmm.
needs too. Right. So there's both ends of the spectrum. It's hard to say who's really doing it well,
Mm-hmm.
because doing it well may be keeping your doors open another day by cutting
True.
costs and benefits,
Right.
right? So
Right.
that's a hard thing. But from an employee standpoint, there's a ton of stuff out there. I think um, we have one client who has really embraced the solstice model. And so that solstice model, for lack of a better term, it kind of is a near site on site clinic, meaning I as an employee can go there and my stuff is covered. I've got strep throat, I want to get antibiotics. I pay wholesale pricing for the drugs, and they'll see me for no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can do a video call, or what's it called? Um, a phone call, and these people will take care of me like they know me, right? So
Right.
that kind of stuff really goes a long way.
Yeah.
And I think the funny thing is dental insurance right now, everybody, there are a number of carriers that are coming out with like an unlimited dental benefit, but they're joined to a dental office in it, right? So they're keeping all the profits in house, but dental is really something people struggle with, right? I need a bunch of crowns, or I need false
Mm-hmm.
teeth, or, you know,
Right.
that kind of thing. So I
Right.
think there's a variety of different ways you can leverage
Sure.
to make your people
Sure.
feel good.
I have to ask you, did you say it was a bank and they're 100% paying the insurance, the premium, so employees are
For the
not
employee, yeah.
contributing anything, right? Like, I mean, they have their
Yeah.
out-of-pocket costs under the plan for maybe medications or copays or something of that nature, but not
Yeah.
a premium that they pay out
Right.
of.
And they don't do the family, but they do the employee. So the
Okay,
employee,
got
so
it.
your single guy is making out, right? When he leaves, because a lot of these are the younger guys that come up and they want to like rise up in the bank. Well, when they go to another bank, they'll be sorely missed. They'll be like, what happened when they actually get the
Sure.
real world
Right.
costs? But yeah.
So Walk me through that. Say I know a business that does something like that. Um, and you kind of talked about some of these concepts, right? Because there's these rising costs. Health insurance keeps going up. So how does the bank deal with that every year and say, hey, we're going to continue this? And you also talked about businesses and the benefits they offer and the concern about taking things away.
Yeah.
How do those conversations go every year? How do they deal with that? And as you said, as the broker, what one thing you don't love about it is that the person who gets the benefit doesn't really understand the cost or the total compensation to them.
Yeah. So I was talking to, and the bank I mentioned wasn't even a bank that I am the broker on. We were
Mm-hmm.
chatting over a networking event. It was the CEO, and she's like, I feel like they don't understand it. Even though I communicate, I say I'm adding $17,000 to your pay
Right.
just for doing this. They don't see the bottom line costs, and
Mm-hmm.
so communication becomes a really big thing in those kinds of
Right.
equations. I had a recruiting firm who did that, and then the cost of it just outscaled. And they were a national, so they had employees everywhere, right? So um, they're like, we just can't keep doing this. So then they had to talk about it, and then they put it in a lump sum. Look, we're going to give you $12,000 a year towards your stuff. And then once you start to put it in a lump sum and they move to the ICRA model,
Mm-hmm.
you start to see that's a large investment a company's making.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think communication.
Yeah, communication, always, right? It's just,
Yeah.
the communication, the vulnerability in that, having to get that out there. You talked about getting pitch slapped. Um,
Mhm.
I think you have some ideas on designing pitches,
Yep.
getting buy-in to your ideas and a sales flow tree.
Yep.
Um, walk us through that.
So a sales flow tree is if they say yes, you move here. If they say no, you move here. I think the quadrant thing that you guys drew today came from the psychology of sales. There was a story Brian Tracy gave about this guy was a salesperson for what's it called, like a bulletproof glass company.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to walk in and he used to have a hammer in his hand. He'd set down the thing and he'd smack the glass as hard as he could with the hammer. And he's like, okay, now how much do you want? And so he was the top sales guy. And so
Right.
they said, we want you to tell him the pitch, right? And so he came in, and he had all the salespeople from the company, and he told him the pitch. Well, the next year, he not only was the top sales guy, but he outdid his last year's performance by a great deal. And so he says, so they get him up on stage again. He goes, okay, so this year I knew you were going to put me up on stage. So I had to come up with something different. So instead of me coming in and smacking the glass, I handed the hammer to the customer and I told him to smack the glass.
Okay.
And so I thought, okay, how do you hand the hammer to the customer? And so what the quadrant that you guys did was me handing the hammer to the customer. And so I have found when they drew out the math, I would start with the base rates and they're like, yeah, it's too expensive. You're right. Does that mean and they would ask the question, does this mean now we're in the ICRA benefit concierge model? Yes, it is.
Got
Right.
it.
So they're already buying in to the thing. Or if it's a no, this is great.
Right.
These are much less. Awesome. Right. So it's a yes or no, and you
So you're
move
laying out that
down.
quadrant for them right off the bat so they can see it. Super
Yeah.
transparent.
I say this is the playbook
Mm-hmm.
on how it works. And I tell them what my commissions will be and things like
Right.
that. So because I don't want there to be any confusion or secrets, right?
Right.
A confused buyer will never buy,
Right.
right? So I
Um,
want there to be transparency.
right. Yeah. It reminds me of the name escapes me, but it reminds me of in sales, right? You have different categories isn't the word I'm looking for either, but I think that conveys the message where you're, this level, that level, or this one, right? And
Yeah.
there might even be more things after that. I think what's neat about that, what you're saying, is laying it right out there so people can see it. and they can then understand kind of where they fit in that model.
Yeah.
Sometimes I
And
guess,
they're directing it too
yeah, go ahead.
at that point. I said they're directing it at that point too.
Hmm.
I have people that are just like, yeah, I don't want to play in that. I'd just rather stay in the ICRA, right?
Sure.
Then they're buying the thing, they're buying your process, which for somebody like me, where I don't have a price differential between the next broker, what I show you will be the same price as he shows you. What you're really buying when you buy somebody like me is the brain that looks at it the way I do,
Hmm.
right? So it's the process you buy, not the broker.
Hmm. Um, how is McDonald's, for example, effective at this? If I went to somewhere like McDonald's and you say, all right, I'll take a burger, and they'd say, well, would you like fries with that? Yes. Would you like a drink with that? Yes. And maybe they're just, know that I'm hungry and thirsty. Um, but that seems very natural to ask
Yeah.
and level up like
Mhm.
that. However, when you're selling products or services, sometimes it feels as it doesn't feel the same way. You know when you're in a sales funnel, so to speak, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So what, do you have any thoughts on that, or like, how someone who has something good that they want to share and offer to people can help their customers, their prospective clients or customers in a situation like that?
Yeah, the first question I think you have to ask yourself is, do you have something to share? Or is
True.
it a product, right?
Correct. Right.
And so if you really believe, if the answer is yes, I have something to share, then why,
Hmm.
right? Like the Simon Sinek always start with why. And so I sold this product probably 10 years or 7 years ago now. It was a managed surveillance and for restaurants. And so I would call a cold call a guy, and nobody likes a cold call, right? So the first thing I always did is I acknowledged it. Yep, it's a cold call. Don't worry, I promise. 3 minutes, two questions, and we're done. And then if after the two questions you want to keep talking, awesome. If not, no problem. But I always went for the throat. I would say, okay, this is what we're seeing in the market. Are you dealing with this? Yes,
Sure.
I am. Awesome. No, I'm not. Then I know another drop down. I had it all laid out. If they answered yes here, I moved here. They answered no, I moved here. And then that question, that no question, led me to two more questions,
Hmm.
right? And then there's a can I help? Because at the end of it is can I help? And if you've gone through the no, 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 I can't help you. So my biggest help is getting off the phone
Hmm. Sure.
and not bothering you, right?
Right.
Maybe leave you with, hey, I get it. You seem to have this all figured out.
Right.
If you run into something like this, I'm going to send you some information so you can remember me, right?
Sure. We
Hope I
put
haven't
Ben's,
left you.
oh, sorry, Ben, sorry, to cut you off there. I didn't mean to do that. We did put Ben's contact information on LinkedIn in the chat. Is that a good place for people to connect with you?
Sure, LinkedIn is good. Yeah, LinkedIn is good. There's transition health benefits. You can literally find me on there. There should be a calendar link if you want to book some time that we can talk. We can go
We'll
from
get
there.
that up there in the chat too. How do you deal with rejection, Ben? You talked about that, right? You got to the point of so many no's, right? You get off the
Yeah.
call. How have you handled that over the years in working through the no's?
Yeah, so there's two ways I've done it. As I've gotten more mature and more confident in what I sell or how I'm helping, then I just say, oh, I guess they didn't need help. I'll
Right.
just find the next one that does, right? That's the one. Or if you're in that job where you have to pretty much grind all day and no is a big part of it, then collect them. Like there's that theory of collecting those. Right. And so when I would go, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go for the world record of no today. Right. And
Right.
invariably, those days would be my most productive day.
Mm,
And I would find yeses more than I would
right.
find nos.
Right. It's the Tony Robbins. I just love it. He's always just like, it's about reference points, right? And expanding your reference points. So if you rest on one no, that's only one reference point. If you stop there, well, then you've stopped. So you have to kind of increase that, right? A baseball player who hits 300 is considered a quality baseball player. That's a hit every 3 times out of every 10 at bats. So 10 phone calls, if you got 3 of those, that would be, I think in your line, you'd be like, great, right? It just takes that practice and getting used to that so hard.
Yeah. Well, and I don't do a lot of phone calls anymore.
Yeah,
My community sells for me. Like,
nice.
so so when I have those one-on-ones with people and I find out what they do, and then I always ask, like, what's your secret sauce? How do you help somebody? Because I say my brain will file it under when I have a person that has that problem, your face will pop up and be the one.
Hmm.
Right. So if I know that's how my brain works, I think your brain's going to work that way too. So I say, look, if your people are having a problem with their people, just say you have a guy that has some interesting ideas.
Right,
Right.
right,
And so I get a lot of conversations off of
right.
being the guy that has some interesting ideas.
Yeah. Well, Dan Hansen's been a great connector for me and you here. So and Dan conveniently turns on his camera now. Dan's getting ready for the golf season. He saw the snow here in Wisconsin, and imagine that set him back a little bit. Um, it
Yeah, he's
just
always
loves.
a little more depressed when the snow
Yeah.
flies. Yeah.
But I'd like to put you on my bench, Ben, and get to know you more and our business. And certainly,
Yeah.
as we're always trying to improve and explore the different options that we have here. And certainly, insurance for our team members is a big deal. So we'll definitely be connecting on that if that's
Yeah, I'd
okay.
love that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'd love to know more about the family practice side of your thing because, like I said, I end up getting all up in people's businesses, whether they like it or whether I like it or not, right?
right,
That's kind of the nature of what I do. So,
right. It's
yeah,
lifelong learning when you're in business. It's one thing that has kept me attracted to family law and the attorneys here is because you're always learning. A lot of people think it's just about the emotions or the kind of the messiness of a breakup, which is also interesting because there's a lot of psychological things and mental health and all the aspects of that. But then we get into the financial end of things as we're trying to figure out support orders and property division. You start learning about businesses, the way that people invest money, the way they make money, and it just is like ever expanding. And that to me made me really attracted to that style of business. I used to be a criminal defense attorney years ago. And you're kind of like, who are you hanging around with, right? So yes,
yeah,
maybe as a young guy and without a family, it was interesting to know drug lingo and what that all meant and everything, but it just didn't make sense to me as time went on to be involved in it. And to the people that can do it and separate it, I appreciate that, no doubt. But for me, I just know that I wanted to get that out of, you know, what I was thinking about, right? And start thinking about these other things that were more fascinating for me.
yeah. There's that. Have you heard the tea analogy?
No, no.
So my wife's a big tea drinker, and so she'll have a bunch of different types. Well, the teas always have leaves in the bag, right?
Yeah.
And so depending on what leaves in the bag is what stains your water. And so if you think of yourself like water,
Yes,
it's that kind of connection, right? What's in your tea bag today?
absolutely.
So
Right. Right.
yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we're at 1:15 already, so it's hard to believe that.
Wow, that was fast.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you working with Patrice to get on for this week. And I always like to have our guests come back sometime in the future. If when I started this in 2021, the number of people that joined the call was one, and over time we've had lots of good people come in. So hopefully we'll have you back this year, next year, maybe once every year. But I'll
Okay.
leave that up to you, and I want to connect with you offline and get to know you and your business more and help each other.
I would love that. Truly.
Great.
And thank you so much for the opportunity to come in and talk and learn. This has been awesome.
Absolutely. And we'll get this up on our YouTube channel. Patrice is working hard on that, and we'll let you know when that's there so people can always find this conversation. Dan, thanks for connecting us up. I appreciate you very much. and everyone else that was live in the Zoom room and live on Facebook. So that's our program for today, and I wish you all the best, and we'll connect with you later.
Sounds
All
great.
right. Thanks. Take care.